Okay, what happened to your foot?
Old battle injury from the gridiron days.
Oh, no, from probably some coach running you at quarterback. That's
Right.
what it was.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board.
Brendan, the Board of Education had we have you on the agenda just to make sure, obviously with the concerns from the staff members presented over the last couple days, we want to make sure you can lay out your plan for athletics so that we're following the IDPH guidelines as well as, I think we're getting feedback. Ask Tom if he can mute, maybe.
Tom, could you mute on your end?
There we go.
Thank you.
The Board of Education wanted to discuss to make sure that we're taking the appropriate safety measures, because if it's not safe to have if staff members felt it wasn't safe to have students on campus, is it still safe to be running these activities? Are we following the protocol? What's your plan? What's your protocol to make sure the board feels that everything is being operated according to IDPH guidelines?
Sure, absolutely. Well, no question, given the recent shift with the landscape of the school, the academic side of things, concerns are growing in regards to athletics as well. We understand that. The athletic department has and always will place the safety and well-being of our student athletes above all else. I believe that we are all fully aware of the difficulties and challenges that we as a community and as a society continue to face on a daily basis. I will tell you that I'm obviously concerned about the future of sports and athletics from the grade school level to the high school or even to the professional level. It's certainly concerning in terms of players to coaches. There's even concerns with officials moving forward into the seasons that require officials. So obviously there's growing concerns on all levels. I'm certainly not a medical expert. However, I am a parent, and I'm a parent of two multi-sport athletes, and having to make that decision, over the course of the summer and even now as they begin to set out and participate in different athletic activities, contests, it's certainly concerning. But again, as a parent, as a coach, as an administrator, I think the upside of continuing with athletics far outweighs the risk for my children, and that's a decision that every parent has to make. We understand that, and at the end of the day, that's the deal for the RBHS parents too. You look no further than one of the greatest academic institutions in the country, and the University of Notre Dame, right? And what they're going through right now. They had 80 male senior students, right, test positive. And if I understand correctly, that was a result of something that happened off campus. So you can have a great plan in place, but you still can't account for what might be going on when they're not with you, when they're not under the direction of their coaches. So moving forward in terms of where we're at, I think RB has set the standard in terms of the industry of athletics, in the sense that we ran our summer camps. We had over 550 athletes. We had 70 coaches. And I think we did a great job with it. Obviously, there's an element of luck in there too, but I think our student athletes listened to their coaches in terms of what the expectations were, not only on campus but off campus, and articulated those expectations with their parents as well. As we move forward now, and we know the guidelines, the recommendations, if you will, they're constantly changing, right, in terms of what it looks like. As soon as you're shared something by the IHSA, it almost feels like it's outdated to some degree, because there's a modification coming 2 or 3 days later, and you're trying to anticipate what that modification is. We currently have approximately 193 student athletes participating in the 6 fall sports that are going on right now. 5 of those sports obviously take place outdoors, and then you have girls swimming and dive, which is taking place indoors. 2 of our fall sports are participating off campus, right, where I'll touch on the transportation in a minute. The rest are all practicing and having their preseason camps since August 10th on campus. Everybody is screened before practice by a member of our athletic training staff and or the head coach. Head coach is also screened by the by our athletic trainer, Bill Fry and Luis Hidalgo. Obviously, we know the two staples are, right, the social distancing piece and the face covering, right? When a student athlete can't exercise social distancing, they're required to wear a face covering. Coaches, whether it's inside or outside nowadays, they're all required to wear a face covering. So that's kind of a blanket deal, and I think we're all kind of aware of that. I think where the concerns are growing in terms of transportation, right? So there's different information that's been provided by different resources. And keep in mind, we obviously have not participated in any off-campus competitions. We've had some off-campus practices with our golf teams, and that's pretty much it. But as we prepare to move forward and what that's going to look like, different information has been provided by different resources, IHSA, ISB, things of that nature. One thing is very clear: every school district is using their own interpretation. And basically, the IHSA recommends 6 feet of social distancing on a yellow school bus, which allows for approximately 15 people. The Illinois State Board of Education, the IDPH, recommends capping capacity at 50 people. And socially distancing is best possible. So you see the difference right there. One saying 50 is allowable, another is saying 6 feet of social distancing, which is approximately 12 people. According to IHSA Executive Director Craig Anderson, back in April and May, the IHSA shared their documents with the Deputy Governor Ruiz, who then passed them to the IDPH. The doctor that reviewed those documents went beyond standard protocol, and again, this is according to Craig Anderson of the IHSA, so he felt that the doctor that was reviewing that, and that was before the IDPH and the IHSA kind of merged in terms of their decision making. So he felt he went above protocol. So with that said, the IHSA has formally requested clarification from the IDPH, and they are still waiting for a response. So that takes us to what is Riverside Brookfield doing. At our RBHS fall coaches meeting, coaches were informed that we would limit capacity to 23. This is the most amount of people on one team that a team would need to travel to a competition for, and I think there's a chart in there we can reference later. I think it's girls cross country would have maybe 23 people traveling to an event. Keep in mind, this is the most amount of people on one team that would need to travel. We haven't had more than 15 passengers on a bus that I'm aware of. So from August 10th till now, the cap's been at 15 since the start of fall sports. We have numerous families that have submitted board-approved paperwork to drive their children to organize team activities. We are not using the minibuses. All passengers are screened before boarding and are instructed to wear a face covering while on the bus. So that's kind of the transportation piece in a nutshell and where things are at. I know there's a lot of information that I shared with you in that packet, but I think it just illustrates how each sport has, some of their own special recommendations, guidelines, if you will. And there's also some inaccuracies that you'll see within sports in terms of spectator, social distancing, transportation. So even within the guidelines that we're being provided with, they're not fully aligned yet. I think they're working on that. I think there might be more to come. But as far as the other schools in our conference, they are set to compete. One school has already had a golf match. So the other 11 schools in our conference are looking to move forward. Obviously, some of those schools just started sports today. Some are just starting tomorrow. So obviously, again, we started August 10th. I feel like things have been trending in the right direction. And obviously, there's some things that happen that are out of our control, but the coaches have been shared what the guidelines look like, what the expectations are through every stage, every phase. They've been provided with information going all the way back to April.
One day, 1 week at a time? Is that what you're recommending?
That's what I would suggest. 1 day at a time, 1 week at a time, and I think it's going to be a constant deal of monitoring, right? And if we do find ourselves in a position or a situation where it's just unmanageable, then obviously we need to revisit how we're doing things. And again, I think it goes back to, you can have a great game plan, but sometimes things happen out of your control and you need to switch things up. So that would be my suggestion, in my personal experience, to take it 1 day at a time and revisit 1 week at a time on a need basis.
So everybody coming, both coaches, students are screened. I mean, we wouldn't have a case where an instructor or a coach wouldn't be here during the day because they didn't feel right, but could come and coach afterwards, would we?
We wouldn't allow that if somebody wasn't feeling well. We would encourage them. We would direct them to cancel practice for that day if another coach couldn't cover for him.
Because I feel if you can't be here to, you know, teach or work, you should be able to coach.
Right, absolutely.
So there haven't been any concerns from coaches about their safety?
I think the biggest concern from coaches is what the transportation piece would look like. And basically, we talked to them. Some of the other suggestions that we made is we suggested if we need to go like on a week-to-week basis, like say this week, if we feel more comfortable going with an A-B day, so varsity's practicing on the odd calendar days, lower levels are practicing on the even number days, just to lighten the load a little bit until we get our footing. Shifting practice time, so if they were scheduled to practice 3:30 to 6:30, let's say, maybe they're just going to chop that practice time in half and focus on the lower levels for the first half, the varsity team on the upper half, whatever coaches feel most comfortable with, because there's different dynamics, you know, like girls tennis has 50 student athletes, right? And for them to get on the 5 or 6 courts, that's kind of challenging. So they're kind of going to that shifted model where they have 2 different time slots. I don't know if that answers your question, but I haven't received any concerns from coaches stating that they didn't feel safe fulfilling their coaching duties.
Thank you.
Do you feel we saw an increase in the 5, 6, you said 6
And
sports,
the
5 sports?
participation, I think so. I didn't get a chance to compare the numbers, but I think obviously there's a few athletes that where their traditional fall sport got kicked back into the spring, and now they're trying something different out. I think we have a handful of athletes that are doing that. Certainly saw a spike in girls tennis and in girls golf to some degree, so I think we're trending in the right direction. And I think, you know, what better time for athletes to try another sport that maybe they couldn't have if it's a traditional
I just
3-season
assumed
school year.
the soccer players are probably also cross-country runners,
Sure.
right? They run a lot. You said there were 70 coaches this summer?
This summer, we had approximately 70 coaches that were
How many
involved
of
in our
those
summer camps.
how many of those are also coaches or teachers of the school?
No, there's
None?
probably I'd say, I'd have to go back and look, but there's a split. It could be, the needle could be pointing towards the teacher side a little bit more, but we do have quite a few dozen coaches that are coming from outside of the building, which they
So if
are
it was half.
professionals in another industry.
So if it was half, that'd be 35. Was there any concerns about coaching over the summer with the
Any
students?
concerns voiced by the coaches
Yeah.
to me? No, I did not receive any concerns from coaches in terms of what they were asked. And when we started the summer camp, obviously there were like 2 phases. You had a voluntary strength and conditioning phase where kids were just kind of just coming out and doing body movements like air squats, lunges, running, things of that nature, no sport-specific activities. So coaches were encouraged to do that, but they weren't directed to do that. Most took advantage of that and did that. Most of them did it outdoors or just in the weight room. So that took place for approximately 2 to 3 weeks. And then as we transitioned into the traditional summer camp setting, it was virtually the same coaches. The same coaches had that option to start their summer camp. All programs had the option to run a summer camp. However, we did not direct them to say, you must run a summer camp. Obviously, they're strongly encouraged every year, but given the circumstances this year, it was their discretion on whether they wanted to run a camp or not.
So did anyone not run a summer camp?
There's a couple coaches that did not. I feel as though they had reservations going into the summer, even like when we set our summer camp up in January and February. Some had reservations based on, you know, what type of enrollment numbers they're going to get. And like obviously we would encourage those coaches, well, the more flyers you put out there, the more marketing that you do, the more athletes you're going to get. For whatever reasons, they elected not to run a camp this summer. And I think that was pretty consistent back in February and January. even coming back to June, you know, it was pretty much those same coaches that elected not to run a summer camp.
So it was a pre-COVID decision more than it was a COVID-based decision.
The number of camps, I think, pre-COVID and like post-March 13th, were pretty close to the same. I think the big difference is there wasn't any more, we didn't have youth camps, right? And so I think that kind of changed the dynamics of what a camp would look like, what it could look like.
So let's pivot to fall. The fall coaches, are there any concerns about interacting with the students?
Falk, I have not fielded any concerns from coaches in terms of working with student athletes. You know, I think the 6 head coaches that we have working are very passionate in working with their student athletes. There's a handful of new assistant coaches that are early on in their coaching career, but none of the head coaches have articulated any concerns to me. I think the other piece that's interesting to that, Mr. Smithing, is you know, the next step after we kind of get a better handle on this is, what do off-season workouts look like? What do open gym workouts look like? Because every sport has now been afforded 20 contact days to use how they want, and that's where you can actually coach kids up. And I'm sure some coaches are going to want to do it, some might not want to do it, but between September 7th and October 24th, they have 20 days to use at their discretion. I don't know what that landscape's going to look like, but it'll be interesting to see who takes advantage.
So the fall coaches, how many total coaches do we have in the fall between head coaches and assistant coaches?
Well, we have 6 head coaches. We probably have another dozen assistant coaches.
And how many of those are employees of the school?
They're all engaged in terms of what they're doing. Obviously, we have one program that's currently quarantined right now that knocks out 2 coaches. But the rest, every coach is engaged and here every day.
So there was 18.
Right.
How many are teachers?
Probably a little less than 18, right? Girls golf has 1.
Girls golf has 1. Girls cross country has 2. Boys cross country has 2. Swimming now technically has 3. Right? Boys golf has 2. And then
But they're
tennis
not all
has,
teachers of the school.
2. So a little less.
Out of our fall coaches, I would say 75% are teachers.
75%.
Maybe let's err on the side of caution, say 70.
70%, and none of them had any concerns about interacting with the children.
None of those concerns were
That's
brought
good.
to me.
Positive.
Obviously, you know,
Well,
we're
I
in
want to
touch.
ask you about the conference. Most of our conference, how many Catholic schools are there?
So there's 9 private schools in our conference. I believe it's 9. Just had a meeting, an athletic director meeting through Zoom today. All 9 are aiming to participate. Obviously, not all of them carry 6 sports. Some of them are carrying 2 or 3 or 4, but all of them are aiming to participate moving forward. The other 3 public schools, you have Elmwood Park, Westmont, and Ridgewood. From what I've gathered, Westmont is full steam ahead. Elmwood Park just started today, and Ridgewood is just in the process of starting up as well.
Does it impact us anywhere down the line because we have more private schools in our conference? If we are slow to the table on contest?
Well, it's hard to make a comparison. I still think, you know, RB sets the standard in terms of how we manage with the guidelines, the recommendations, and what that looks like. I've had some inquiries from those 9 schools. They're trying to create documentation that aligns the conference in terms of athletes know what to expect when they go to another school in terms of what the transition looks like getting off the bus. Coaches giving a roster to the other coach, event workers writing down like what parents, spectators, because at the sports, at the contest, only guardians or parents can go, but they still need to sign in. They don't have to give up contact information, but just so we can go back to that AD if we do need to do some contract tracing. So the conference has been pretty collaborative in terms of trying to get the seasons going. But, you know, I think it's the public schools that are kind of going slow and steady right now, where the private schools are full steam
Well,
ahead.
that's my concern, like, right? We should, if we're gonna put kids on a bus and they come, well, first, with swimming, I thought there was no spectators. Was that in the guidelines? Or is
I
spec-
believe you can have spectators when they're 30 feet away or more. But, you know, for a majority of the sports, it's just parents.
Okay, so we just gotta check on the swimming one, because if we have that many girls in the pool, we gotta make sure we're not over 50 unless, I don't see how unless the IDPH approved being over 50 indoors, so we need to check on that. But the second thing would be, the last thing I would wanna have happen is some kids get on a bus, come to RB to maybe have a swim meet, or a golf, well, we won't have to worry about golf match or anything, the rest of that's outside, but if we're scanning temperatures again before they come into our building, and some kid tests hot, what are they gonna do with that kid? They ain't gonna make him sit on the bus, him or her sit on the bus themselves, right? So we should probably work with, make sure that there's some protocol, and I don't even know if the IHSA covered this, but right, those schools should be self-certifying and doing temperature checks before they get on the bus,
Right.
so that we don't have any kind of, I would hate to put a kid in an uncomfortable position that, well, you know, the thermometer at such and such school came up hot, even though it didn't come up hot at RB. Like, we would want to try to make sure we're eliminating those problems before they occur.
Sure.
So are these 9 Catholic schools, they're all going to school in person, right?
Are the 9 private schools going to school in
Yeah, I don't
person?
think they're all
Yeah.
Catholic. I think they're private.
Private school.
I think I think they are. I think there's some hybrids. I'm sure there's some remote learning within that. I couldn't rattle off the numbers right now, but I know that some of those schools were in session today. So there's a handful of them that are trying to work through the remote lens.
Board have any other questions on athletics?
So one issue I'd like to raise, not, I think for discussion at our next meeting, if this is a good time to do it, is I
Yep.
think we should talk about the student fees associated with athletics, and then the student fees associated with other clubs and activities.
Right.
And how we may want to handle that in light of some of the uncertainty and some of the virtual planning that's going on. So
Okay.
if we could get a report, I think, from.
Kristen, can you put that on for under the?
Yeah.
I think in terms of
'Cause
anticipated.
we did make some adjustments to that last year in a general sense when
Right.
everybody was still in school, and I think there's room for adjustment for sure.
Right, I think we would need to know exactly what we're looking at, so we can have kind of a anticipated report and then talk about what our next steps would be.
Michael and Lily, do you guys have anything? No?
The board approved a memorandum of agreement last meeting with the RBEA in regards to stipends. So there'll be 3 categories of stipends. Essential stipends were approved. There's the remaining clubs and activities that could not, or could be done virtually were approved with some language, and then there's some language in regards to athletics. So there will be opportunities for extracurriculars offered to students throughout the year, whether it's virtual or in person, depending on all this goes. Tonight, I just want to make sure I have the okay for Brendan. I told him to suspend any in-person competitions with other schools until the board had this meeting tonight, to make sure you guys are okay with proceeding with trying to do competitions as well as while it's safe. We need to continue to monitor situations on a daily basis and guidelines on a daily basis. But, you know, I don't want you to feel like you have to succumb to the pressure of the private schools just because they're in our conference. You know, if we have less competitions this year, I think the kids will still want to compete, right? And so just make sure things are safe and in line with the guidelines, the IDPH. If Brendan does carry out those tasks, is everybody okay with competitions proceeding?
Well, I personally am all about in-person learning, so I'm all about in-person sports. And it seems we have no concerns from the coaching staff or the staff in general about it, so I don't see an issue why we wouldn't go forward.
You know, I do wrestle that it's hard to be in school. You know, it's just hard for me to, you know, reconcile the two, but we can do sports. So that is hard for me to kind of reconcile. And I know the kids love sports. I have a college athlete, and that's, you know, push to spring. You know, they got a lot of things, but yet they're in school. So they focused, and the students are going to be in class. It's kind of a bitter pill for me to swallow that we can have in-person coaching, We can have competition, but we can't be in the school for learning. That's a bitter pill for me. And maybe it's something that staff here might want to look at, because I don't see why sports should be more important than the academics. And that, to me, ocular seems to what has happened. Sports always seems to trump education. But if we're going to vote, we'll vote with the board, but I will say, it's very difficult. And I don't think I'm alone saying that.
I understand. Thank you.
Anybody else? So I don't think we need a formal vote. I just want to make sure that, based on Brendan's plan tonight, we're okay to proceed. The straw poll would be fine. I don't think it requires a formal vote.
All right, all in favor of continuing sports? Aye. Aye. The nay?
Tom, speak up now if you have something to say.
No, I'm in favor as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I think,
I mean, the one thing I would add is I'm in favor of all of these activities continuing to the fullest extent possible. I just think it's, for all of the discussion about social and emotional learning and giving kids a chance to identify with the school, these are all opportunities for that, and that's why I'm really in favor of it.
the mental health of the children is very, very important. And
You know, we
this
can
is part of it.
control our students, try as best as we can, with protocol and guidelines. We have no control over other teams, how they're handling, we're assuming that they're going to be handling the same, the same cautions that we are. But possibly, we encourage or give the coaches to communicate with the other teams. What are your guidelines? How are you monitoring, situations? I think in advance, I think it's fair.
You're on the side of caution, Brendan. I think the fact that kids are being able to work out with their classmates and participate in these activities is great. If we have some competitions, but not as many as usual because we can't get on the same page with the other school, the board, I don't think I'm speaking wrong for the board to say, we'd rather you have your ear on the side of caution and skip that contest if we have. Play it by ear. One day at a
Absolutely.
time.
The definition of success in terms of athletics is being redefined, right? What does a successful season look like? Having some form of competition, right? To give those kids that outlet and give them a fulfilling experience. We know it's going to be limited contests. We're going from 16-week seasons down to 11-week seasons. So I think the kids know that, and I think coaches are aware of that, and they'll take what they can get. And to your other comment, Kevin, in terms of like the whole public-private dynamic, each sport is trying to come up with like pods, right? So a pod for cross country would be RB, Elmwood Park, Westmont, and Ridgewood, right? Just because we're pretty centrally located, like schools, like with like, and not having to bring a St. Francis or a Timothy Christian all the way out to Aurora Christian, all the way out to Riverside Brookfield. So we're trying to apply that as best we can to each sport.
And Brendan, I just wanted to say I'm really proud of you as the AP of athletics. I've seen your communication, I've been to your meetings, and you're doing a great job. But like the reality says, we always have to look at those guidelines, and things could change, right? We're having a contest one day and possibly not the next day, But proud of your communication and whatever support you need from us. We're here for you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Dr. Freitas.
Thank you, Brendan. I know you got an injury. It's uncomfortable to sit, so